All right. So I'm going to tell you like a weird supernatural trick or tip or something. Because I was just sitting here thinking about it and I was like, I don't think everyone knows that. There's like little weird things that I know that I'm not sure, like, I'm not sure if everybody else knows this stuff. But I was just thinking about this chain, this necklace that I had the other day, and that it got bound up. It had knots formed in it. Like, I took it off for a second, and then all of a sudden, these knots formed in it. But right before they did, this chick who I hadn't really been around very much at all walked into the room, and then all of a sudden, my necklace began to get knots in it. Well, one way that I've been able to tell when I'm in a household or around someone who uses witchcraft is this knotting, this binding and knotting that happens. And I'm not sure why it's knots. It might be symbolic of the fact that that person is bound. And for those of you that have seen the Devil tarot card, that gives you an idea of physical binding. A couple people being bound in that photo with chains. All right, but binding is something. It is technically like a form of witchcraft. However, binding and rebuking are also a Christian theme. It's also part of the Christian theme. And binding is likened to decrees and declarations, which is like a whole, it's like an entire, those are like entire sermon. It's like, it's kind of a lot of content behind those things. But yeah, I had my necklace off for a second, and it does have a cross pendant on it. And then the chick walked in, and this is something that, and my necklace began to knot up, and I knew immediately that she used witchcraft, which is a regular thing everywhere I go, something that I run into everywhere I go. I started to notice it when I was a teenager, and I believe that was because that was whenever I first began to use binding and witchcraft. When I was a young teenager, I was taught some witchcraft and did practice witchcraft until I was about 13 or 14 years old, when I chose to be a Christian instead, and I stopped using witchcraft. But I would still secretly use certain divining methods that I was taught. And I would ask permission, like ask God for permission before I did, because it's actually really heavy stuff. I mean, if you do it right and you know what you're doing and people are doing it right, it's when it's really real, when it's the real deal, it can be a very heavy, it's a lot of spiritual energy that you have to yourself have the energy and um, rank basically to it gets deep. I'm just saying it gets a little bit complicated and complex. So you definitely need um, protection, especially if you're not one of those people who was taught to be a monster. Because a lot of the people who are in that witchcraft side of things, they were kind of taught to be the darkest thing in the forest, you know? And that's not what I teach, and that's not what I was. That's not the Christian way, anyways, of course. But it could at any point be that a Christian in the forest could still be the most dark and dangerous thing in a forest, even compared to a witch. I mean, under certain circumstances, anyone could be pushed to that point. Don't put it past anyone. One of the Sun Tzu's laws for the art of war is, um, not to push an enemy past the point of desperation. Not to push an enemy too far, and to always have, and then as another one is to always have basically a golden bridge for your enemy to retreat away from you. Give people an out. And don't just make things so morally terrible that, even the people who follow you begin to question, whether or not they should be on that train. That's a sign of poor leadership when people have to ask themselves that question. You can't follow every leader. There's a reason why people follow Jesus, and that's because it works. The witchcrafty stuff does work too, but it's all quite temporary, and you kind of receive backlashes for it, and it can take you in directions that you did not plan on going, and people generally realize pretty early on that they might have been better off if they just had let God and the universe deal with it, and they hadn't stepped in and tried to manipulate circumstances. Anyways, I just have to talk past 3 or 4 minutes, because if I upload it under 3 minutes, then it becomes like a short, and I definitely don't want to have shorts out there because I'm just not that kind of channel. You know what I mean? Probably shouldn't even be on YouTube, but YouTube needs it. I mean, especially if they're going to have all these other people talking to me on YouTube. You guys can hear something I have to say once in a while. So, if you want to know whether or not someone in your house is using witchcraft, and I assume that this method might fail a time or 2 or 3, but one way that my necklace doesn't just bind up like that when I take it off. When you take your necklace off, when you undo your chain and you hold it in your hand, it doesn't just tie itself into knots. It's not going to do that. You can watch it not tie itself into knots for 100,000 years. But when you take that chain off and you take it off around somebody who uses witchcraft and baneful dark magic, black magic, sacrificial blood magic, and nasty things like that, CP magic, nasty magic, you will see knots begin to form. And it doesn't have to be a chain. It can also be anything else that can get a knot in it. A string, a thread. Even if all you have is thread, you don't have to have it in front of you either. You can put that chain in your pocket or that thread in your pocket and just leave it there. And you can even put it to the test. You can go into different people's houses for a day or 3, for an hour or whatever, and see if that chain begins to bind up on you. because I promise you that there's going to be different places that you go to. If you put a chain in your pocket and you go into a place where there's heavy witchcraft, or heavy witchcraft is being performed against you, that chain will begin to bind up and it will develop knots in it. And it will be just like a demon or an angel or a ghost or something was reaching into your pocket and putting knots, legit knots, into your chain. And I know that there's a lot of people who are like, but you just get knots in your chains and knots in stuff. No, bitch. We do not just get knots in our stuff sometimes. No, we do not. I've been around long enough and I've had enough chains and, shitty ass necklaces and jewelry and carried enough shit around in my pockets to know what I'm fucking talking about here. And it's a fucking weird supernatural fucking thing that goes on, that it's representative in the spiritual world of how a person or a place is bound. And as many different knots show up in that place, it shows you just what it's symbolic of what that person or what that place is bound by, or how they bound themselves. Each one of those knots is like a promise between that person and the entity that they swore with, or the entity that they made a pact with. Anyways, obviously this video is not going to be for everyone, but for the people who know, it's that, okay? And the knotting is really weird. Now, whenever I was a kid, the witch who taught me to be a witch, she taught me binding spells. She taught me how to bind anyone. And she taught me how to practice that, and she actually had me do it on my own mother, or the gal I'm just going to assume is my own mother, even though I haven't seen necessarily DNA proof of it, and I didn't watch myself be born. No one has been able to show me photos or videos of that, and there's apparently an eyewitness who is my aunt, but my aunt is also guilty of some pretty serious stuff, so I'm not sure how much of her testimony I can actually take. I would also like to say that my aunt made a video of me giving birth to my child, and it was a C-section. I wasn't allowed to see it when it happened. No one showed me a video of it. And she took a video of it and no one ever showed me. So I'm pretty sure that video was sold, and that's why I wasn't allowed to see it, because I would see myself have my own baby on the internet somehow, potentially, where other people, my stalkers and various others were hoping that I would pass away during that time, and they were, there was a chance that either myself or the baby could pass away. So they, of course, had to record it, hoping that maybe that would happen and that maybe they would have a film of that, I guess. I mean, I'm assuming that that's what's behind it, because no one ever let me see it. And it goes, I guess, along with the films that everybody sold. So that's been really crappy. But anyways, when I was a kid, I just wanted to mention that. Actually, I was thinking about mentioning that another time. I don't want to forget that, so I am throwing it into a video, even though it's not the same information or whatever. I just don't want that to be forgotten. I saw my cousin in the store yesterday, and she kind of acted weird to me. I haven't talked to her in years, but there's no telling what she thinks or what she's been told, and all these people have all been told things, and they think all kinds of stuff, and most of them are demonic anyways. So I can't really worry about what they think. That's part of the reason why I didn't go out of my way to stop and talk to her. She just kind of made a rude face at me. Like, I don't know if she meant to be rude, but I wasn't going to deal with any sassiness from anybody. So, sorry if you didn't really mean to give me a rude look, but it just kind of seemed like that. And you obviously didn't go out of your way to speak to me either. So it's just, there's too much weirdness with everybody. But anyways, I was taught witchcraft by this chick named Terry around here, who I think has begun to send people to me. I'm not really sure, but she doesn't apparently have the dick and balls to like answer my friend requests, which she did do a lot of really bad stuff to me whenever I was a kid. One of the things that she did was from across the room, from a distance of maybe between us and that freezer over there. I don't know if you can gauge that distance. I don't know, 6 or 8 feet. She turned my head completely around on my shoulders to where I looked directly behind me. And I've actually coined a term for that, what she did, and I think I called it the owl head spell. Because the owls, they can turn their heads completely around. And I'm not sure if that has to do with the Illuminati or whatever, but when I was 11 years old, this witch, who everybody knows out here, of course, I don't know if they call her that. It sounds really rough, actually. I didn't really mean it that way, but it's whatever. Not that I give a fuck what this bitch thinks necessarily. But anyway, she turned my head completely around. And I'm assuming that was some kind of death spell or death magic. I'm not sure if I was just not supposed to survive it. I have no idea. Like, I'm not sure how they were going to explain that a girl's neck broke in a house without anyone touching her, and what could she have done? Break her own neck or whatever. Which also, not to change the subject again, but that also leads into another thing that I don't want to forget about explaining someday, which has to do with neural monitoring technology and the ability to take over a person's body remotely, and that it is possible for those people to grab your head and turn it themselves and like get you to break your own neck. It's pretty messed up. But what Terry did was turn my head around completely backwards to where I looked directly behind me. And my head basically did this, like I could feel the skin on my neck like tighten and be like in a way that it, like, the neck wasn't actually supposed to do that. It was like some fucking Stretch Armstrong shit. And I am going to cuss on this channel because I'm not going to get paid for any of this fucking shit. And I've just been completely run into the fucking ground out here for years and years. So I'm just going to say whatever the fuck I want to say. So yeah, we bound my mother. She taught me how to bind my mom. And my mom was really bound. She actually was spiritually bound. It was almost like this bitch was an autopilot. I didn't mean to get like super aggressive a second ago with I'm going to say whatever I want to say. You know what I mean? I didn't mean to, like, I wasn't trying to be aggro, but it is fucking aggravating just to be out here this fucking long and to just not really be able to say what I really want, just to have felt for so long that I couldn't really say what I wanted to say, but sort of doing it now anyways, even though but yeah, we bound my mother. And if you've ever seen that movie, the Adam Sandler movie Click, where somebody's on autopilot, it basically does that to a person. It makes it to where like they can't see, they can't even perceive what's going on, or they pretend not to, or something happens to them and they really just can't. They don't know. It's like they cannot see if like a child can. I probably shouldn't let everybody know this, but basically anybody can do anything in front of anybody's face. And if that person is bound, they're not going to do anything about it. If you bind them to not be able to do anything to you or anything about certain things that you do, if they're not supernaturally protected, those binding spells do work. So I got to learn that early on, but one of the ways that a binding spell goes down is by taking a piece of thread or a piece of whatever kind of a strand of something and putting knots in it. And each knot, people say different things for the knots, or sometimes they use different numbers for the knots. Sometimes the knots are symbolic of different things, and sometimes, I don't know. But there's all different kinds of ways that people do it. It's the intent behind it that matters, basically. That's where the real magic is. That was a lot. I didn't really mean for it to be all of this, but I guess it's some more crappy content for my crappy channel. Yep, so binding. Witchcraft, if you're curious as to whether or not you might be surrounded by danger, you can practice this thing with this chain. And it might be kind of a weird thing to be a fidgeter and to have a chain on your neck that you're constantly taking off and putting back on and messing with and stuff like that. But also, yeah, it's some really weird supernatural stuff that has become a signature, like a sign for me. Like there's specific signs for everyone, I think, that spirit world might work with us all to show us specific things, like individually, that they know that we will get. Like for me, spiders is one of the thing. A spider is symbolic of someone who is one of the bad guys. That's somebody who is trying to actively betray you, has plans to betray you, or even worse than that, somebody who also I've noticed that people who might involve themselves in animal sacrifice, that spiders will show up as a sign that and for some reason those dark creepy crawly critters from the spirit world show up as some kind of warning. And I noticed one time there was this guy who was sent to me from uh, Louisiana or Mississippi, the Bayou, or Alabama, or somewhere like that. Anyways, this douchebag that was sent to me from one of those places, and he took me up to these hot springs in New Mexico, out on an Indian reservation. And while we were hanging out, I wasn't entirely sure whether or not he was one of the bad guys, but I was pretty sure because everyone that I ran into and that I run into ends up being one of the bad guys because I'm controlled. I'm basically being watched by this network and group of people, and they make it to where I'll only be able to interact with or mingle with certain people within their network. And whenever I run across the country and stuff like that, they have to actually do they have to wait till I get wherever. Sometimes they're already there. Sometimes they're already prepared wherever they're basically everywhere already. The network's everywhere already. They just have to get a hold of people there whenever I'm there or before I show up and that sort of thing. But while I was in the hot springs, the moment that I began to be like, I know that this guy is a bad guy, and I'm kind of expecting the universe to jump out and scream at me, I saw, like, as soon as I had that thought, like, I saw a spider. And I can't remember if it was a spider on the water or if it was, like, I don't know, but it was some kind of spider situation. And instantly when I saw the spider, I knew that the universe was letting me know that this was a bad guy. And so I just, automatically knew that I was hanging out with a bad guy for the rest of the time. And that was pretty early on. That was within the first 2 or 3 hours of hanging out with him. Also, before my boss poisoned me, I would see a spider, and it would almost seem like the same spider crawling up the wall in front of me, like up towards her room. And I would feel like it was a spider trying to be like, hey, she's going to get you. You know what I mean? And sure enough, within like just a day or three, it was like spider after spider. I felt like was like trying to tell me that. And then within like a few days, I know that sounds crazy as shit, and then within a few days, she actually did poison me and I almost died. It was like, I knew the spider was trying to tell me. And I was like, I know she's going to get me, spider. I know what the plans are. Thank you so much for trying to warn me, and that's one of those things that like, in passing, wherever I go, not everybody knows what a spider means. And I can always just, no matter what, even if they see this video and they're studying me and all that, whenever we see a spider and we're together, I can always just be like, oh, crazy spider. You know what I mean? And they won't know the difference, or they might, you know what I mean? pretty much, I don't know. It's fucking just so many different possibilities, and I'm just totally like winging this as I'm saying it, but I do mean it. The spiders and the knotting is some serious stuff. And as far as witchcraft goes, and I, if you have an object or a way of reading or interpreting the level of evil that's around you, even if it's something strange like a chain that gets knots in it, um, I don't necessarily need anything like that personally, because I can tell even without the knotting. Oh, I can tell. Yeah, I can feel it for sure. It's quite heavy, but it isn't always obvious. You know what I mean? It isn't always obvious, and because it isn't always obvious, that's why Spirit World would give us those little, you know what I mean? Because I wouldn't have sat there in that kitchen and thought, oh, this person does witchcraft just completely out of the blue. No, she had to walk in while I had that chain in my hand, and I had to watch it knot up into 8-10 different knots that now I'm going to have to sit here and pull apart because this chick does witchcraft. And I almost said to her, hey, you really shouldn't be messing around with witchcraft like that. But I didn't want her to know that I am that sensitive, and I also don't need for anyone to gaslight me and play in my face and try to lie to me. Because what's worse than being sensitive is amazing. I love it. As far as, being a child of God and being, a chosen one, and having discernment and prophetic abilities and psychic awareness and things of that nature. But what's almost worse than being able to pick up on and read everything around you and to know the thoughts and emotions even of everyone around you is when you make a statement to them outright like that and they lie to your face. When they lie to your face about it. Yeah, like what's more difficult than being really psychically sensitive to everything is when people lie to us about it, about what we know. It becomes really irritating, and that's something that I have to deal with on a regular basis. Yeah, okay, so cool. I didn't really mean to make a 30-minute video. And I denounce any witchcraft attacks against me. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I pray. Amen. And if you have not accepted the Lord Jesus Christ as your personal Savior, I would encourage you to do that right now. And if you're one of my ops, that's cool. If you do that, I still hope that you go to prison for what you did, whether you become a Christian or not. And maybe your Christianly ways and the good Lord will help you get out early. Okay. Bye. Peace and love, everyone.